was not supposed to be in the hall at all. I was supposed to be in the kitchens with flour to the elbow and a tray of honey cakes that needed turning, and instead I was wedged against the back wall with the tray going cold in my hands because the steward had run out of servers and shoved me through the doors with one word: go. So I went. I stood at the back where the lowest of us always stood, behind the warriors and the ranked daughters and the nobles in their grey and silver, and I watched the Alpha King's mating ceremony the way you watch weather you cannot do anything about. I was 22 that spring, a woman grown by any pack's reckoning, human-born and wolfless, and therefore nothing in a room like that one. The candidates knelt in a half-moon on the dais. Lovely, all of them. Bloodlines you could trace back 4 generations. And at the centre of it stood the king, and his great black wolf paced the front of the dais like a thing deciding. I had seen Halvar of the Iron Reach perhaps 3 times in 2 years, always at a distance, always with the hall arranging itself around him the way iron filings arrange around a lodestone. They called him the coldest crown in the north. They said his wolf had not chosen in 7 years and never would again, and that this ceremony was a formality his council had forced on him. The wolf stopped pacing. It lowered its head, and then, past the kneeling noble daughters, past Lady Astrid in her silver, who had been told since girlhood the choice was hers, it came down off the dais and crossed the entire length of that hall, and the crowd peeled back from it in a wave, and it walked straight to the back wall where I stood with my cold tray, and it sat down on my feet. I laughed. I want to be clear that I did not decide to laugh. It came out of me the way a hiccup does, helpless and badly timed, because the most feared wolf in the north had just planted itself on my boots, like an enormous, ill-mannered dog, and because the only explanation that made any sense was that the creature had made a mistake, and I was the kind of person mistakes happen to. The hall did not laugh. The hall had gone the particular kind of silent that has weight, that you feel in your back teeth. 100 faces turned, and on the dais the king had gone very still, and he was not looking at me. That was the first thing I noticed. Even then, even laughing, he was not looking at the human girl his wolf had chosen in front of his entire court. He was looking at the doors. He was looking at Gunnar, his second, who had already put a hand to his sword. His jaw had set like a man counting something, and what he was counting was not me. I read it as displeasure. I read it as a king cataloguing the scale of the insult, deciding how quietly the kitchen girl could be made to disappear. His face had closed like a door, and I thought, well, that is the end of that then. I was wrong about almost all of it. But I would not learn how wrong for a long time, and the wolf would not move off my feet for any of it. They did not make me disappear. That was the first surprise. By pack law a chosen could not simply be set aside. The wolf's choice was the wolf's, older and truer than any king's preference. And to override it openly was to admit the king could not command his own beast. So instead of vanishing, I was moved. Out of the kitchens, into a small stone room with a real window and a fire laid every morning by someone I never caught, and into the strangest weeks of my life. I kept my honey cake recipe, and my opinions, and very little else of who I had been. I told myself I would stay until they came to their senses and sent me back down. I told myself I could leave any morning I chose. The gate was not locked, the road was right there, rejection of the bond was my right by the same law that protected it. Staying was a choice. I made it every day, and I made it for reasons I did not examine too closely, which should have warned me. The king avoided me with a thoroughness that would have been flattering if it had been about flattery. He took the long corridor when the short one ran past my door. He left rooms I entered. Not quickly. Never quickly. A king does not flee a healer's apprentice turned kitchen girl, but with the unhurried certainty of a man who has somewhere else he has just remembered he needs to be. I started keeping a private tally. 3 rooms in the first week, 2 in the second. Once, memorably, he turned an entire mounted patrol around in the courtyard, rather than ride out through the gate I happened to be standing near, and I watched 12 warriors wheel their horses in confusion, while their king examined the sky as though it had personally offended him. His wolf had no such dignity. The wolf found me every single day. It would be waiting outside my door in the grey before dawn. It brought me things. A pheasant feather laid on my threshold with great ceremony. A river stone worn smooth. Once, horribly, a live frog which it deposited on my windowsill and then sat back to observe my reaction with what I can only describe as pride. It walked me to the kitchens when I went down to bake, because old habits and good bread are not things you give up for a window and a fire. It lay across the kitchen doorway while I worked and made a low, unbothered sound at anyone who tried to come and tell me I no longer belonged there. And every time, somewhere in the fortress, I imagined the king with his face in his hands. That was the gap that undid me, in the end. Not the wolf's devotion, the distance between the wolf, who had decided everything, and the man, who was losing an argument with himself in every empty corridor in the keep. The wolf chose me at dawn. The king spent the daylight hours pretending the dawn had not happened. I had never in my life seen anyone work so hard at a thing he had already lost. Lady Astrid did not find any of it amusing either, and unlike the king, she made certain I knew. She found me on the 7th day in the lower garden, where I had gone to escape the feather situation. She was everything I was not, tall, silver-eyed, born to the days I had stood at the back of, and she arranged herself on the path in front of me the way a blade arranges itself in a sheath. "You should not flatter yourself," she told me. "A wolf is an animal. Animals make errors. The man it belongs to has not spoken your name once, and do you know why?" I waited. People like Astrid never need you to actually answer. Because the last creature his wolf chose in front of that court is in the ground. She let that sit. 7 years now. He learnt his lesson. You are a curiosity. You will be a kindness, he regrets. And then you will be gone, and I will still be standing where I have always stood. She smiled, and it was a good smile, and almost kind. I am telling you this to spare you. Go back to your kitchen girl, before he has to be the one to send you. I should have been afraid. I was the lowest thing in that fortress, and she was the highest, and she had just told me a dead girl's worth of history, in a voice like cool water. Instead, I heard myself say, if he's so certain it's an error, he's spending a great deal of effort not looking at it. Her smile thinned, and she left, and I stood in the empty garden with my heart going harder than I wanted it to, and I thought, in the ground. 7 years, I turned that over and over, and I came to entirely the wrong conclusion, which was that the king had loved someone once, and that I was a ghost wearing the wrong face. I am a fool about a great many things, but I was watching the wrong story, and I had no way to know it yet. The first time we were alone, it was an accident, and it was the library, and it was the closest thing the Iron Reach had to a warm place. I had gone in for a book, and still room herbs I am, underneath all the new stone, frog deliveries, still a healer's apprentice, and a body needs its trade, and he was already there, standing at the long table with a ledger open in front of him, and the firelight on the stone, and his wolf, naturally. Asleep across the only other chair, he looked up. For the length of one breath, he did not have his door of a face arranged, and what was underneath it was not contempt. I did not have a word for it then. I have one now. You read, he said. Not a question. A man finding the floor unexpectedly higher than he remembered. I do a number of things that surprise me. I set my hand on the back of the chair the wolf was not occupying. Sitting, for instance. May I? His jaw moved once before he found the words. It is my library. It's a very good library. That's not what I asked. He looked at the door. I had begun to notice he always looked at the door. Not at me, not away, but at the door, as if measuring the distance, as if a part of him was always standing between a person and the nearest way out. He moved then without seeming to decide to, and he was between me and the entrance, his back half to the fire, and I do not think he knew he had done it. Sit, he said. I sat. The wolf cracked one eye, approved, and went back to sleep. We did not speak for a while. I read about Fever Bath, and he pretended to read his ledger, and I watched him not read it, the way his eyes stayed on the same line too long, and I thought of Astrid's cool water voice and the girl in the ground. They say your wolf hasn't chosen in 7 years, I said to the page, not to him, and that it never would again. The quiet that came back was different from the others. It had a flaw that dropped out of it. It chose, he said at last. 7 years ago. It is not a thing that asks me first. He closed the ledger with great care, as if it might wake. And I learned what it costs when the whole court watches it happen. What does it cost? He looked at me then, actually at me, the door forgotten, and the thing under his face came all the way up and I forgot how to breathe in the ordinary way. Everything I cannot afford, he said. Now go to bed, kitchen girl, the fire's dying. It was not an answer. It was 3/4 and the missing quarter was the whole of it. I went. But I took the wrong piece with me. I took grief. I took a dead love. I took a king mourning a woman I could never be. And I climbed the stairs aching for the entirely incorrect reason. The wolf walked me up. It always did. I told it good night, and it leaned its great head against my hip for exactly 1 moment, which I have since learned is the longest a wolf that size will permit itself to be soft. I went up to my room with its real fire and its real window, and I lay awake building a whole tragedy out of 3/4 of a sentence and a dead girl I had never met. A lost love, a grieving king, a kitchen girl in the wrong face at the wrong time. It had the exact shape of the truth and none of its actual weight, and I believed it before the candle burned down, because I have always been quickest to trust the version of a thing that lets me feel sorry for myself with some dignity. I was wrong about every part of it. I am going to keep saying that, because I worked very hard to be this wrong. If you are still with me, and I hope you are, because the part where everything I thought I knew turns inside out is coming, do me one small kindness and tap the little bell, subscribe, whatever your device calls the thing that tells these stories where to find you again. I tell it the way it happened to me. I would like to keep telling it. Now, where was I? The court. Yes, the court is where Astrid stopped warning me and started moving. It was a feast for the spring tide, the great hall full, the long tables groaning, the king at the head of it with his crown that always sat on him like a thing he was carrying rather than wearing. I had been seated at a feast, a kitchen girl, 3 places down on his left, which was a statement the whole hall could read, and I spent the first hour very aware of how many people were reading it. Astrid rose between the second and third course. She had a cup in her hand and the room's attention before she said a word, because that is a thing you are born knowing how to do or you are not. A question for the hall, she said, light as anything. We are asked to honour the wolf's choice. We always have. It is our oldest law. She turned, and her silver eyes found me, and the whole table turned with them. So I would only ask, for the good of the pack, does the kitchen girl know what happened to the last one the wolf chose in open court? Has anyone told her? Or are we to let her walk that same road in ignorance, and call it kindness? It was beautifully done. She had not insulted me. She had worried about me, out loud, in front of 300 people, and turned a dead woman into a threat, and aimed it squarely at me. And every face in that hall swung from her to me to the king, to see which of us would break first. The king had gone still in the way I knew now meant something other than calm. I felt the room deciding I was already gone. I felt the old place at the back wall reaching up to pull me back down to it. And then the wolf got up from beside the king's chair. It came down off the dais a second time, past Astrid, past the staring nobles. The whole long length of the hall again, unhurried, enormous, and it reached my place at the table, and it lay down across my feet under the linen, where everyone could see exactly nothing and absolutely everything, and and it put its chin on my boot. And it sighed. The hall made a sound like a held breath letting go. I did not laugh this time. I had learnt that much. I looked up the table at the king, and I watched him try to find something to say that would make his wolf's answer into something other than what it was. I watched the man reach for the door and find his own beast had walked through it, and he found nothing, because there was nothing, and he did not deny it. "Lady Astrid," I said into the silence, and my voice came out steadier than I had any right to. "If a wolf is only an animal that makes errors, you have nothing to fear from this one. And if it isn't, I let my hand rest on the great head at my feet. Then it has already told you everything you wanted to know, and you are arguing with it in front of the king." Astrid sat down. She sat down the way a thing sits down when the chair is pulled out from under the argument it was standing on. And I would like to tell you I felt triumphant, but mostly I felt the king's eyes on me from the head of the table, and the strange warmth coming up the bond like a hand laid flat against my spine, and underneath all of it, the cold thread of grief I still thought I understood. I went to find out what happened to the girl in the ground. That was my mistake, and my making. Both I went looking for a dead love. I should have asked myself why a man who had loved and lost would build his protection out of doors and exits and counting the threats in a room instead of out of mourning. The ledger was not hidden well. That should have told me something too. It was in the library, in the long drawer of the table he never read at, and I found it because the wolf nosed the drawer open and then sat back and looked at me. And I have stopped pretending the wolf does anything by accident. I expected letters. I will be honest with you, because I have been honest with you the whole way down. I expected the soft hidden thing this kind of story always hides. Letters he had written and never sent. A list of my name crossed off and written back on. The secret tenderness of a proud man, waiting to be found. That is not what was in the drawer. It was a ledger of names. Years of them. Dozens, and beside each name, in his hard upright hand, a place. Coldwater Hold, the Selkie Coast, a holdfast in the eastern mountains I had never heard of. And beside each place, a single line drawn through the name, crossed out. Every one. I did not understand it. I sat down on the floor of the library with the thing in my lap, and I read it 3 times before the shape of it came up out of the page at me. And when it did, the whole story I had been telling myself turned over in the dark and showed me its other face. They were not lovers, they were the chosen. Every person his wolf had ever turned toward, the glance held too long across a hall, a step taken in a crowded room, the small public betrayals of a beast that knows its mate before the man does. Every one of them written down. And every one of them sent away. Coldwater Hold, the Selkie Coast, the eastern mountains, far, safe crossed out, not because they had died, but because he had gotten them out, scattered them to the edges of the world before the court could turn its attention into a target, before a rival pack could do to them what had been done to the first. Because the first had not been sent away in time. The first was the girl in the ground, the one openly chosen, 7 years ago, in front of everyone, before he understood that the wolf's choice in public was not a blessing, but a mark painted on a person's back. She had been killed for standing too near a throne a rival wanted. And the king of the Iron Reach had spent 7 years making certain his wolf never chose anyone in the open again. And on the rare wretched occasions it did, getting them out fast, far, alive, and crossing the name through with his own hand like a man closing a wound. He had not been counting the insults that first night. He had been counting the exits. He had not looked at me because he could not afford to let the court see him. His face had closed like a door because he was already, in the first 3 seconds, trying to work out how to get me to Coldwater Hold before Astrid's silver eyes finished doing the arithmetic. He did not find it funny. Of course he did not find it funny. His wolf had just walked across a crowded hall and painted a target on the back of a girl with no wolf to defend herself, and laughed about it, and the only thing in the world he knew how to do to keep that girl breathing was to send her so far away he would never see her again. I sat on the cold floor, and I held 7 years of grief in my lap, and I felt of all the ridiculous things, ashamed of every clever thing I had ever thought about a man losing an argument in a corridor. The wolf put its head in my lap, on top of the ledger, and looked up at me, and I understood at last that it had not been throwing him at me. It had been trying to keep him from sending me away. He came in while I was still on the floor. I did not bother to hide the ledger. There is a point past which you stop performing for each other, and we had reached it without either of us noticing. You weren't meant to find that, he said. You left it in a drawer a wolf can open. He looked at the wolf. The wolf looked back, unrepentant, traitorous, and entirely pleased with itself. Something in his shoulders went down a notch. Cold water hold, I said. That was to be mine. The Selkie coast. The road safer this season. He said it like a man reciting a sentence he had passed on himself. There is a holdfast there. A good one. They take in the wolfless. No questions. You'd have the sea. You bake. There's a town. A market. He stopped. He had clearly thought about this in more detail than a man arranges for a curiosity he regrets. You would be alive, and far from anyone who would use you to reach me. And you'd cross my name out. He did not answer that. His jaw did the thing. I got up off the floor. I was shaking a little, and I let him see it, because I was done being clever at him. You have spent 7 years, I said, keeping people alive by making sure they never get to choose. You decided for all of them. You decided the girl in the ground would have wanted you to keep the next one breathing more than she'd have wanted to be asked. I took a breath. You never asked me. I am asking you to live. You are telling me to leave. Those aren't the same, and you of all people know the difference, because your wolf has never once told me to do anything. It asks. The great head pushed against my hip. Every dawn. With a frog, once, but it asks. For a moment, I thought he might smile. The corner of it was there. Then he looked at the door, always the door, and put it away. If you stay, he said, lo, they will come for you. Astrid is the least of it. There are 3 packs on my borders who would give a great deal to put a blade in anyone I cannot stop caring about. I have a wolf that has just told all of them, publicly, twice, exactly where to aim. Staying is not brave, Orla. It is a way to die slowly while I watch. It was the first time he had said my name. I had been in his keep for the better part of a month, and he had not once, and now he had, and it came out of him like a thing he had been rationing. Then let me decide that, I said. It's mine to spend. He left. He did not flee. A king does not flee, but he left, and the wolf stayed, and I sat by the dying fire with the ledger, and understood that I had won an argument, and lost nothing, and gained, somehow, a great deal of danger, and that I would do it again. Astrid moved the next day, and this time she did not bother with a cup and a clever question. She came to me at mid-morning with a request that sounded like an errand, and was a trap, and because I did not yet have the measure of how far she would go, I nearly walked into it home. The healer's stores at the old ritual site on the cliff path needed restocking, she told me. Sweet as you like, and who better than the king's own clever kitchen girl, who knew her herbs. Chancellor Osric had approved it. The king was in council and not to be disturbed. I want to tell you I saw through it. I did not, entirely. What stopped me was the wolf, which planted itself in the doorway and would not move, and would not let me past, and the low sound it made at Astrid came up out of the floor, and Astrid's silver eyes flicked, just once, to the cliff path through the window, and that flick was the whole of it. That was the tell. I had been raised by a healer. I knew the look of someone already picturing a body. I did not go to the cliff. I went to the council chamber, wolf at my heels, and I put my shoulder into the doors of a room I had absolutely no rank to enter, and that is how I came to interrupt the King of the Iron Reach mid-sentence, to tell him his chancellor had signed an order to send me alone to a cliff edge on the same morning a rival pack's outriders had been seen on the eastern road. The room went very loud and then very quiet. Osric was smooth about it. Chancellors are. A misunderstanding, a routine restocking. The girl was overwrought, and I watched the king look from Osric to Astrid, who had appeared in the doorway behind me with an expression of perfect concern, and I watched him do the arithmetic he was so very good at, and I watched it come out wrong for them at last. The Eastern Road, Halvar said quietly. Who told you the path was clear, Chancellor? Osric had an answer. Osric always had an answer. But Gunnar was already moving, and the order to send me had Osric's seal on it and not the king's, and the outriders on the Eastern Road were not a rumour, and by nightfall the shape of it was plain to everyone. Astrid had not been working alone. And Osric had spent years quietly steering his king towards safe matches, and away from inconvenient ones, and a girl on a cliff path during an incursion was simply the most efficient version of a thing he had been doing slowly for a long time. It is a strange feeling to be the bait in a trap and survive it, and to watch the people who set it realize the trap has closed on them instead. But it was not over. Cornered things are most dangerous at the end, and the king did the thing I least expected, which was that he did not send me to the Selkie coast. He called the court. All of it. 3 days later, in the Great Hall, with Astrid under guard and Osric's seal broken, and the borders bristling, and I assumed, we all assumed, that he had called us to announce, at last, the sensible thing. That he had decided, that the kitchen girl was for her own safety being placed somewhere far and crossed through. He stood before the wolf throne, and he did not sit on it. For 7 years, he said, and his voice carried the way stone carries cold, I have kept a ledger. Some of you have wondered where certain people went. I sent them away. I told myself it was mercy. I told myself the dead would have wanted it. He let that land. Nobody in that hall was breathing. I was wrong. I made myself a man who could be reached only through people I had already abandoned, and I called it strength. It was fear wearing a crown. He looked at me then, in the open, in front of all of them, the way he had not allowed himself to do once in a month, and I felt every eye in the hall follow his to the back where I had drifted out of old habit, and I made myself stand still under it. My wolf chose, he said, twice, publicly, because it has more courage than I do. I will not cross her name through. I will not hide her at the edge of the world to keep my own heart safe. If the packs on my borders want a way to reach me. And here he stepped down off the dice and crossed the hall himself this time, the man and not the wolf, the whole length of it, while the court peeled back in that same wave, and he stopped in front of me, and he did not stand between me and the door. He stood beside me, facing out. Then they will have to come through both of us. In the open, where everyone can see. I have replayed that walk more times than I will admit. The point of it was not romance. The point of it was that it cost him everything the ledger had been protecting. It made me a target he refused to remove. It told 3 rival packs precisely where his heart was. It overruled his own chancellor and his own 7-year policy and his own grief. In public, at the worst possible moment, because the alternative was deciding for me again. You should have asked me first, I told him, very quietly, just for us. I'm asking now. The corner of his mouth. Stay, I was always going to. It should have ended there. These things never end where they should. The rival came at the claiming. It was meant to be a quiet Reich, a king's claim, witnessed, the bond spoken in the old words before the pack, so that no law could question it. Halvar had insisted on doing it in the open courtyard, rather than some guarded inner room, because the entire point now was the open. And that openness was exactly the gap Astrid had sold before they took her cup away. She had known where he would stand. She had known he would put himself between me and the gate out of 7 years of habit, and that for one moment, speaking the old words, his back would be turned to the eastern wall. I saw the archer before he did. I saw the movement on the wall and the dark line of the bow. And I understood in the half-second, the body understands before the mind does, that the king was speaking the words that bound us, and his eyes were on mine, and his back was to the wall, and the wolf was 3 strides too far away. And there was a door, there is always a door, and he was, even now, even claiming me, standing his body between me and the way out. So I did the one thing 7 years of his careful arithmetic had never accounted for. I did not get behind him. I stepped in front. I put myself between the king and the eastern wall, between the blade and the back it was aimed at, and the bolt that was meant to find the unguarded space behind a turned king found my forearm instead where I had thrown it up, and it opened the arm to the bone, and the pain of it was white and total, and I stayed on my feet. Blood on the courtyard stone, a great deal of it dark on the grey. The wolf was a black blur, and then the archer was screaming, and then Gunnar's people were on the wall, but I knew none of that in the moment. In the moment there was only the king's face, the door of it blown clean off its hinges, his hands on my shoulders, and his voice saying my name like the word had broken open in his mouth. "You stepped in front," he said. He could not seem to move past it. "You stepped in front of me. You've been doing it for a month." My arm was screaming. My voice, by some mercy, was not. Someone had to show you how it's done from the other side. And I finished it. That is the part I am proudest of, and the part the healers scolded me for. I held my ruined arm against me, and I said the rest of the old words, my half of the claiming. The half that makes it a choosing and not a taking. The words a chosen speaks back, so that no one can ever say she was only marked and never asked. I said them through my teeth, with the blood running off my fingers onto the stone. Because I was not going to let a rival pack's archer be the reason my name went unspoken in the open after everything it had cost to get it there. The bond closed like a hand around a hand. He kissed me then, once, and I will not describe it except to say that the cold thread of grief I had carried for a month went out of me entirely, and what came in its place was so large and so quiet that I understood, finally and completely, that I had been right at the very back of the hall on the very first day, about exactly one thing: he was not as cold as the North believed. He had only built the fire somewhere no one was allowed to stand. I was allowed to stand there now. Then I fainted, which rather undercut the dignity of the moment, but a person is entitled to faint after stopping a crossbow bolt with her arm. And the king carried me to the healers himself, and did not let go, and the court has been talking about it ever since. Here is the fallout, because there is always fallout, and I promised you the truth all the way down. The arm healed crooked, it aches before rain. I can no longer knead a full batch of dough without resting halfway, which is its own small grief, because my hands were the one thing about me that were never the lowest of anything. Halvar offered me 100 healers and a southern surgeon and a great deal of guilt, and I told him the ache was mine to keep, the way the staying had been mine to spend, and he has learned, slowly, to stop trying to decide my costs for me. He is not good at it yet. He is trying. The trying is the whole of him, once you know to look. Astrid was not executed. I asked for that, and it surprised everyone, including me. She was stripped of her name and her place, and sent, there is a certain justice in this, to Coldwater Hold, to the cold edge of the world she had been so eager to send me to live a small life far from any throne. Osric lost his seal, his title, and his liberty, and the Eastern Pacts lost their archer and 3 of their boldest assumptions about how reachable the King of the Iron Reach truly was. The Borders did test us. Twice that winter, they found a king who no longer hid the thing he loved, and therefore could no longer be reached through it the old way. And they found a Luna who had stood in front of a crossbow once and was widely understood to be willing to do it again. And they decided, on balance, to test someone easier. That is the part the ledger never accounted for. He thought love in the open was a target. It turned out to be a wall. It is spring now. A little more than a year since the wolf sat down on my boots, and I laughed in the wrong direction. I am writing this in the lower garden, the one where Astrid once arranged herself in my path like a blade, except that it is full of bees now, and somebody has planted the herbs I asked for, the fever bark and the bitter root, a healer's garden in the heart of the king's keep. The wolf is asleep in the sun with its great head on my foot, which is where it has decided it lives. There is a new pup somewhere in the keep, not ours, an orphan of the autumn skirmishes, a small fierce thing the pack took in, and it has attached itself to me with the same blunt certainty the wolf has, and the king pretends to be put upon by the pair of them, and is fooling absolutely no one. A letter came last week from the kitchens of my old village, from the woman who taught me bread, asking, carefully, whether the rumours were true, whether the girl who could not stop turning the honey cakes was really and truly the Luna of the Iron Reach. I wrote back that the cakes still need turning and that I do it one-handed now, and that she should come north in the summer and see for herself, and bring her recipe for the spiced loaf, because mine has never been as good. Halvor reads over my shoulder when I write. He is doing it now. He has stopped standing between me and the doors. He stands beside me, facing out, and on the rare evenings when there is nothing to face he simply sits, which took him the better part of a year to learn, and which I count among my finest works. He still does not find the first day funny. I have made my peace with this. I find it funny enough for both of us, the most feared crown in the north, undone in his own hall by an animal with no sense of occasion, and a kitchen girl with worse. And one evening, just once, I caught the corner of his mouth going while I told the story to the orphaned pup, and I have decided that counts. His wolf knew before he did. His wolf knew before I did. It walked the whole length of that hall and sat down on the lowest pair of boots in the room and waited, with infinite patience, for the two of us to catch up to a thing it had already decided. We got there, slowly and at cost, and one-handed, but we got there. So tell me, did you see it coming? Did you read his closed face the way I did, all wrong, and think it was the end of the story when it was only the beginning of the real one? Come find me in the comments and tell me where you misread it, because I promise you I misread it worse. And tell me where you're listening from tonight. I like knowing where in the world these stories land. If this one warmed you, stay a while, there is always another, and the wolf at least will be glad of the company. Subscribe, and I will tell you the next one the way it happened to me.